Hi, this is Anna Imagination with a Healing Garden, and I am currently recording for my LinkedIn class, live on LinkedIn. So I'm going to go ahead and do what I normally do and just start and talk and go into the 12 ethics. And if people show up to do a Q&A, we'll go over that. So I've been doing a lot of work recently on simplifying the 12 ethics down into digestible material, so that it is more comprehensible and easily to integrate into one's life. And this is where it gets interesting because they're already integrated into our lives. We're just not aware of them. Education is the catalyst of awareness. This is where, in mathematics, every catalyst is actually invisible. So what ends up happening is, without the awareness of the catalyst, a lot of symptoms get chased down. Now, in mathematics, specifically in logic, we learn this. So whenever we are assessing anything and looking for a solution to a problem, whenever we are identifying a problem, we know in logic and mathematics that you don't want to look for what you can see. You actually want to look for what is invisible, because it is the invisible catalyst that is causing everything. And this is actually a narcissistic tactic that they use, where they become the invisible catalyst to pull at all the strings and the marionettes to hide themselves as being the actual catalyst. So people watch the puppet show not aware. I mean, we know, because we know that there's a puppeteer standing behind the puppets. I have to switch. I have to switch topics. I can't use that as an example for my own personal reasons. So you have somebody who's manipulating and pulling the chains in the background, like exactly like Wizard of Oz. And you see all the bells, the whistles, the smoke screen, the show, and what they don't see is the man behind the curtain. And once you identify the man behind the curtain, you identify the true catalyst. So one of the skills that we learn in logic is how to sort out the symptoms from the catalyst. And knowing that if you can see it visibly, well, then you are 100% chasing a symptom. You're not actually dealing with the catalyst, because catalysts are always invisible. So when we have people walking around saying things like awareness is the catalyst of change, or awareness is what causes change, this is actually incorrect. And the reason why is because awareness doesn't materialize itself. It is a chain reaction. It is a first generation of a chain reaction in chain reaction science. The catalyst of awareness is education. This morning, I was asked by one of my readers how education can help or stop or derail abuse and recover from it, or even prevent it. And I broke down his question into the explanation that 100% of awareness comes from education. That through education, we have the tools we need to strategize, to assess a situation, to steer and navigate our own life properly away from any kind of a problem into the direction that we want it to go. We have the discipline and the ability to literally plot our lives, so that when we do have an obstacle, we can use problem-solving skills and chain reaction science to navigate and circumvent the obstacle. And when you use mathematical projection and the Cartesian coordinate system, you have the ability then of foresight, quite literally strategic mathematical foresight, to assess what is the highest probability of chain reactions leading to X, and how can I steer my life away from X from happening by taking preemptive measures. This is preventative problem solving. So you use foresight and projection to basically prevent and stay 20 steps ahead. This is literally what 20 steps ahead means. It means you are calculating out trajections 20 symptoms ahead from the catalyst. The catalyst is 100% taking place in either the present or the past. And when you can see new catalysts coming into your perspective scope, you have the ability to go, oh, I don't want that catalyst because that's going to set off this chain reaction. So now I'm going to strategically navigate my life and go over this way. This is logic, problem solving, strategic living with deliberation. It is the ability to problem solve and prevent problems. It's problem prevention in a nutshell. And when you add in all the variables, you have such a magnificently powerful tool that you can literally make whatever you want your life to be. The problem is knowing all the components. Now, the largest component in any life strategy is the 12 ethics. And they are they're not known. They are 100% not known. So we're going to take this time to sit down and break down what the ethics are, what ethics specifically are, and the characteristics of the ethic. An ethic is a personal law. And there is a common belief that a personal law, an ethic, is chosen by a person. And this is partially true. To be more specific, it is chosen and governed by nature, and you have the choice to follow it or not. And this is what free will is. Free will is the choice to follow the ethic or not. The ethic is there regardless. And there are 12 core ethics, and there are lesser ethics. Now, the lesser ethics are consequences to the 12 ethics. The 12 ethics are the catalysts. And this is where it's very, very important. For instance, a lesser ethic is trust. Now, I'm going to say the word lesser in the sense of not value or worth, but in consequence versus catalyst. Trust does not just happen. It is a symptom of the first, second, and third ethic integrated like a cocktail to make up the third ethic or the first grouping, trust. Trust is an ethic, but it is literally a consequential recipe. It is made up of the integrated components of the first, second, third ethic. So if you lack the first, second, or third ethic, you are not going to have trust. This is where trust issues come from. The first ethic is courage. And the second ethic is self-authority. And the third ethic is self-regulation. So we're just going to focus on these ones in this example today because these are the most important. Absolutely. These are what I refer to as the foundational ethics. Now, if you lack the foundational ethics, you are going to lack trust. You are going to have trust issues. 100% of all mental illness comes from the compromised foundational ethics, without exception. Every single one of them. Narcissism comes from the third ethic, where the person has learned self-authority, only self-authority. They lack courage, they lack vulnerability, they lack self-safety and self-regulation, and they lack trust. So this makes them paranoid, hyper alert, because they lack the first ethic, which is the ability to self-soothe, the ability to self-comfort, the ability to self-safe, to be self-safe, and also the ability to self-regulate. So in the second ethic, that is a time perspective, a block of time in a person's life where they are mentally forever in this concept of being out in the open, being exposed, being under attack. It's very much a living in no man's land mentality, which is why people in the third ethic are always ready for war and are very alert. Now, if you have that second and first ethic both integrated, if you have that first ethic and you step into self-authority to learn self-authority in that second ethic, it's going to solidify your ability to regulate, pull yourself out of your war zone and get back into a comfort zone. So it's really balancing between the comfort zone and the war zone. Now, I like to refer to the war zone as the adventure zone, and it's all about the mentality. The war zone becomes, or the adventure zone becomes a war zone when that first ethic is missing. And as a result, the adventure zone is literally an endurance test. It's how long can you be on the adventure before you get tired? How long can you be on the adventure before you get exhausted? Now, stay out too long and you're going to wear out. You're not going to have the ability to fuel up. You're not going to be able to regulate. You're not going to be able to stabilize, ground yourself, energize. And that's going to completely drain your ethical resources. It's going to drain your physical and your mental resources. You're going to start getting mental and physical symptoms like being tired, being hungry. You're going to start feeling a lot of things interact with you where you're going to feel burnt out. This is the feeling of being burned out. It's because you don't lack, or you lack, the first and the third ethic, which is courage, self-comfort, self-care, and self-regulation. So as a result, people who are stuck in that third ethical perspective stage where they need to be learning self-regulation, if you do not have the first ethic, courage, you are not going to be able to regulate. So this is where a lot of people struggle with, I've got my self-authority, but you can't regulate if you don't have something to toggle back and forth between. So people step into the third ethic, having learned self-authority. They are their own authority, but without the ability to self-care and self-soothe, it turns into literally a Lord of the Flies mindset, where it's that with them, every man for himself, what's in it for me? And because you lack trust, because you lack the first ethic and the third ethic, you're now going to be paranoid. You're going to be hyper vigilant. This is where we start to see a lot of PTSD symptoms. Now let's jump over to the first ethic. The first ethic, and the word ethic, when I say ethic, courage, for instance, what I'm actually referring to is the trials and the stages that a person needs to go through to earn the ethic of courage, or to earn the ethic of self-authority. So the ethic is different than the ethical perspective. The ethic is very different than the ethical summation or the ethical comprehension of what you're dealing with. The ethical perspective refers 100% to a block of time that is inside your mindset that provides with you all the visible components that are accessible to you. It doesn't mean they're visible. It means they are accessible to you. And understanding this difference is vital to understanding your ethical health. So the ethical perspective is 100% all about you understanding your visibility. It's knowing what is accessible to you, not visible, accessible. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over to the whiteboard. And I'm going to go ahead and lay this out to you in these formats. These are the characteristics of every ethical perspective. They are the same. They are highly predictable. Every person goes through them. And when you don't, that's when mental illness occurs. So the first thing we're going to cover is the characteristics of an ethical perspective. And again, this is quite literally the characteristics. What's the word I'm looking for? The accessible visibility to you, not the visibility itself. So let's call this what is accessible to you. And is not the visibility itself. This is vital. And the reason why it is so vital is because the ethical challenge, and there is an ethical challenge of every one of these perspectives, the ethical challenge is to identify 100% of what is visible to you. That is the ethical challenge. Now, if you are not actively, consciously looking for what is visible to you in your perspective, then you are never going to move on. This is where we get stuck in an ethical perspective. It's because people are in this block of perspective time. And in point of fact, we're just going to come right out and call this. In ethical perspectives, time is the block of ethical perspective accessibility to you in that period. That is absolutely what time is here. And once you reach the seventh ethic, time is done. Everything we ever thought we knew about time ceases to exist, which corresponds with what Einstein and every physicist said, that time does not exist. Time does not exist. It is completely different when you are stepping into the ethical perspectives. completely different, which is why we say things like in your own time. It is actually referring to your own perspective. You cannot learn a perspective prematurely. This is like the first law of ethics. You cannot learn any ethic prematurely. And this is going to get really, really weird because you can, but you can't. Dr. Graves said you can't. However, I have seen plenty of sixth perspectives who did not learn the first, the second, the third ethic, and boy, are they mentally really struggling. So you can. You shouldn't, but you can. So I want to say you cannot healthily, that's it. You cannot healthily learn any ethic prematurely. And the best way to give an example of this is when you have a 5-year-old talking to a 35-year-old about the meaning of life. The 5-year-old is going to understand what 5-year-olds understand, and the 35-year-old is going to understand what 35-year-olds understand. But there's something I really want to take a step back from and explain here, because it's not about the age, and this has been the misnomer. It is absolutely not about the age. It is about the ethics. The ethics are what determines a person's wisdom, which is why you have some 30-year-olds who are much less wiser than some 10-year-olds, which is why you have some 12-year-olds who are insanely wiser than 70-year-olds. Age is absolutely a distraction. Age is part of the hierarchical system, which we're going to talk about much later in depth throughout the entire course. So the ethical IQ is actually a person's true age, and it's their true knowledge, and it's their true wisdom. So we're going to say that again here, is that the ethical age is a person's true age, perspective, knowledge, and wisdom. And that's it right there. Absolutely solid. An ethic is a person's true age, their perspective, their knowledge, and their wisdom. So when you are stepping into the characteristics of the ethical perspective, you have an agenda. There is truly an agenda. I love calling this the perspective pack. And the reason why is because it literally is the same formula over and over again for every single perspective. So the first thing is you are going to have a challenge before you. The next thing that you are going to have is a strength. You are going to have a weakness. You are going to have something that you indulge in. This is very important. Very, very important. This is the most important thing of your challenge. This is like the be all end all of the ethics, is what you have to indulge in. And then there is the what you are avoiding, which is just as important as the indulgence. The indulgence and the avoidance is it right there. And then you are going to have a lesson that needs to be learned. If you are not learning this lesson, then you are not learning. And this is going to determine, now these are what you are supposed to do. This is like your perspective to-do list. Now there's going to be consequences. It's going to determine your values. It's going to determine your ethics, your ethical law. It's going to determine your priorities. In the first through sixth ethic, it is going to determine your authority. It is going to determine your autonomy. It is going to determine your boundaries, your behaviors, and it is 100% predictable. It is so predictable that once you learn the 12 ethics and the personalities of each and every 12 ethic, you can sit down, talk to any person anywhere. You can look at their language, you can look at their clothes, and you can go, oh, that's a second perspective. Oh, that's a fifth perspective. Oh, that's a fourth perspective. Oh, that's a seventh perspective. It is that predictable. It is absolutely a basic algorithm. And this is the best part, is every single one of them interacts and moves off of each other. It is extraordinary to watch. Now, because the ethics are already embedded into us, we just don't know them. This is not something where you have to go out and get them. They're already in you. It depends upon what stage you are in. So if you are in the fifth ethical perspective stage, that's going to tell you immediately where you are. If you have mental illness, I'm telling you right now, you have not learned the first, second, or third ethic. That something about those three things are compromised. And depending upon which mental illnesses you are struggling with is going to determine which of those three ethics you are dealing with. It's such a formula and an algorithm at this point that, for instance, if you have a problem with addiction, first ethic, absolutely the first ethic, and also the third ethic, depending upon the severity of it. But really, it's the first ethic. If you are struggling with narcissism, if you are attracting narcissists, third ethic. If you are struggling with codependency, second ethic. If you are struggling with mood swings, that's perspective abuse. That's perspective abuse right there. If you are dealing with mood swings, it's because you are either a higher ethic and somebody's forcing you to be at a lower ethic, and you don't know which of those ethics to follow. So depending upon the safety, you are walking around each person. If you are wearing a mask where you act like person A over here, but you're over in this group and you're person B, well, those are the ethics. You are a second ethic with these group, but then you go home to a reunion and you're a fourth ethic, but then you hang out with your best friends and now you're a sixth ethic. And you'll shuffle. This is mask wearing. You will absolutely shuffle your personality to accommodate all the different groups of people. That's why when you're around a particular group, you feel the most relaxed and comfortable. You're in your own ethic. When you are people with ADHD, are people who are supposed to be at a much higher ethic, usually anywhere up to the 10th, and they're being forced to live at a second, third, or fourth ethic. Every one of these ethics has its own frequency, has its own vibrational frequency. So if you are a fifth and sixth perspective and you're forced to live at a second perspective, that's going to create, in physics, out of phase signals. And now you're going to shake and vibrate. Just like in physics, when you take atoms and you start to compress them, you're shaking because you have out of phase signals, because you are experiencing a compression of the frequencies, which is now leads to all of the symptoms of ADHD. Bipolar, manic. Now you're looking at having ADHD while also having depression, because depression is one of the symptoms of the first ethic. And also it is a symptom of ADHD where you're supposed to be at the seventh or the eighth ethic, but you're being forced to live at the second ethic. So a person with bipolar most likely is a seventh, eighth perspective, but they didn't learn the first ethic and they're being forced to live at a second or a third ethic. So that's where bipolar comes from. Schizophrenia that's something entirely different. That is when you are passing through the seventh, eighth, ninth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and ninth ethic. It ends at the 10th ethic. And in philosophy and ontology, there is so much documentation about that, about all the symptoms. That's what Nietzsche wrote about. That is absolutely what Nietzsche wrote about, was what I refer to as the metaphysical transformation. They call it they call it something different. I can't remember what they call it. It's a completely different phrase. And it's really, really deep ontological studies, which is what you find in advanced philosophy. So once you start to understand how all of these mental illnesses revolve around the ethical perspectives and what it is you're struggling with, if you have anxiety, first, second, third ethic. If you have stress, first, second, third ethic. If you have social anxiety, first ethic. If you have self-mutilation, suicidal ideation, first ethic, first and second ethic. Suicide, first, second ethic. If you are struggling with, if you're struggling with imposter syndrome, that's the second ethic. It's what I refer to as the forbidden fruit paradox, second ethic. So every mental illness, everything in our minds revolve around these ethical perspectives. Once you establish and solidify the first, second, and third ethic, your life becomes so much more stable. This is literally your mental stability, is how much are you following the 12 ethics? The 12 ethics are literally the stepping stones of your life journey. Now, the other thing about all of this, and we're going to zoom in on that indulge and avoid for a minute. This is absolutely one of my most favorite things to talk about and to zoom in on here is I have no idea how to do this. I do not see where it's going to allow me to create a new page, which is different. Usually it allows me to do that, but it's not letting me do it here. So, all right, I'll just go ahead and improvise. So then one of the things wait, is this it right here? Oh, why is it over here? This is odd. Okay, so we're going to go ahead onto the second. Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted. So we're going to go on to this next page here. And we are going to focus on something else. The indulge. Remember how I said that it was very much, very, very important. And this is why. This is learning right here. This is learning and this is evolution. Learning, growth, evolution, mental health. And I need to clarify stabilized mental health. So these are all the same thing. Learning, growth, evolution, stabilized mental health, these are all the same thing. So you have indulge, which leads to avoidance. Now, when you are in the first ethic, you are supposed to be learning your first ethical perspective challenges, which are self-safety, self-management, not regulation. There's a difference. Self-soothing. Self-care is part of it. It's a consequence, though. It's a symptom. You are supposed to be learning how to self-celebrate. Now, once you learn all of this, all of these things lead to a new emotional response. So this is where I love to pull physics into this, because this is physics, 100%. All of these things, self-safety, self-management, self-soothing, self-care, how to self-celebrate, this is giving you grounding and energizing. Now, all of these things are actions. And when you are taking an action, what you are really doing is you are creating, here, I'm going to do this, action creates or leads to emotional potential energy or kinetic energy. So you are literally, every time you make a choice, every time you do anything, you are literally creating energy. And that energy gets stored up inside of you in potential emotional energy. So as you are building up emotional potential energy, it is converting into it is creating a new emotional response referred to as boredom in some cases. In other cases, excitement. It is literally the summation of your potential energy. That is where emotions come from. So how this works in science is this way. We have a catalyst. The catalyst leads to electric energy, which we call signals, which fire off synapses in our brains, which leads to a hormonal response, which is called chemical energy, aka chemical energy, which leads to emotional energy, which leads to stored or transferred emotional energy. Now, this is where you have to make a choice. And this is the problem. We're going to create this thing called an obstacle. More specifically, a barrier. This is the barrier. Now, the only way through the barrier is you. You are the only thing that is in the way of said barrier, because you're going to have to make a choice. Now, if you don't make a choice, your emotional potential energy is going to store up, and you are a vessel. You only can have X amount of energy before you're not going to be okay. Emotional energy must be transferred, and that storage can only handle so much storage before. Once it hits that maximum storage capacity, it needs to be transferred over into kinetic energy. The only way to do that is through choice. You have to make a choice. Now, this is where a lot of people do not make choices. So what ends up happening is, instead, this stored potential energy creates emotional response. Now, this is good. This is absolutely good. When you get the emotion boredom, that is your system saying to you, you have maxed out your emotional energy storage capacity. Your storage capacity has been maximized. It is now time to transfer that information and that emotional energy over into kinetic energy. What are you going to do next? In most cases, a lot of people do nothing. A lot of people suppress it. A lot of people, this is what happens with addiction, is as soon as that potential energy starts to rise up, there is a little tripping point where anxiety or discomfort begins. You want the discomfort because that discomfort leads to boredom. But in somebody who struggles with addiction, as soon as they hit that point, they panic because they associate discomfort with problems. They're afraid of discomfort. So discomfort in the addictive cycle equals pain, fear, and panic. And when they feel discomfort, they immediately siphon off that discomfort prematurely, and they turn to an addiction. And that drops their potential energy way down low, so their potential energy never gets filled up. For the person struggling with addiction, they have to learn how to endure and regulate and manage their fear through exposure therapy, through regulation, and through a plan, in order to get through and manage that discomfort. So when they get to the point of boredom, they strategically use their plan then to transfer that potential energy into something positive and intentional. Now, what that does is it then gives you an ethic. The ethic it gives you is courage. It also gives you the power of choice every single time. Now, the power of choice immediately leads to self-authority, which is why in that first ethic, as soon as you get done with the first ethic, you immediately transfer over into the second ethic. So you get your self-authority, and that gives you confidence. This is where confidence comes from. And that gives you self-esteem. And that gives you proof of concept, which gives you excitement and motivation, which leads back to more choices. And this is the cycle. This is a healthy cycle. That is what is supposed to happen. So you get the courage. And when you get the courage, there's going to be new emotions that come to you. The first one is vulnerability. Now, vulnerability does not mean weakness. Vulnerability means open to receive. That is what it means. So when you get that courage and you feel open to receive, it immediately trips it over, and you get the emotion vulnerability. Now you are open to receive. This is why you need courage, is because it takes great courage to be vulnerable. I'm going to say that again. It takes great courage to be vulnerable. There isn't a single narcissist in the entire world who accepts vulnerability. In fact, the narcissist has declared war against their vulnerability because they do not have courage. Narcissists lack actual true courage because the true courage that you seek is vulnerability. It's not just, for me, the words are so embedded simultaneously that I almost cannot tell the difference between courage and vulnerability. People say that courage is when you have fear and you overcome the fear. For me, I don't feel it that way. I feel courage is so synonymous with vulnerability because you feel vulnerable. You feel the desire to go and venture out, which is going to leave you open and exposed. That takes great courage. The only real thing that we have to overcome is accepting our own vulnerability. It's allowing ourselves to be open to receive. And here's the catch. It is the only way to connect with human people. You do not step into vulnerability and you will not connect. If you are in a business, if you are in a network, if you are trying to trade resources with somebody, it's not going to happen. You're going to have to do it unethically. And this is just it. If you are not stepping into vulnerability to connect ethically, then you are doing it unethically, which is why narcissists who are running their business practices do it unethically, is to bypass the vulnerability because they lack the courage to be vulnerable. That's why. 100%, that's why. There's a lot that's tied into the 6th ethic on this, equal footing, and also the 9th ethic, human connection and power economics, which play a massive role in this first ethic, courage and vulnerability. In order to learn this ethic, courage and vulnerability, you have to indulge in self-comfort. You have to show yourself that at any time you have the ability to comfort yourself, to provide your own safety. And that's really what it is, the control of your safety. Controlling your safety is vital to feeling and accepting and allowing vulnerability. People who struggle with addiction do not at all feel control over their own safety. They don't understand what control is. They do not understand what safety even looks like. So they hoard, literally, and they indulge on what they think is a comfort zone because they are in pursuit of safety and control over their safety. But they are not going about it ethically, which is via the natural law of the ethics and order, according to Mother Nature. So as a result, they pursue it any other means, any other way, which is to bypass that first ethic, which is courage and vulnerability. So as a result, they never get there, which is where their entire system turns into pursuing addiction, pursuing hoarding, pursuing the possession of, and it literally turns into hoarding. There's a lot that we hoard. We hoard time. We hoard control. Actually, all we ever hoard is just control. It materializes into all these other things. So what we are all hoarding when we have this problem is control. And some people view control in time. They view control in space, in possessions. Now, this is what I refer to as consumption. This is what I refer to because it consumes you. I call this consumption. I also call it possession. Just literally the possession, because it literally takes a hold of you and possesses you. And this is the beginning and the foundation of narcissism. It is when you lack the ability of having that courage to open up and step into vulnerability that it now turns on you with consumption and possession. It takes hold of you. It consumes you. It eats you alive. And you seek out that control now in any means necessary, so long as you can avoid that discomfort and that pain, that fear, that panic. You are now bypassing and enduring and learning how to self-regulate, self-soothe, self-manage your own safety. You don't know how to ground and energize. And as a result, this spirals out of control into one of the three logical catch-22 loops that keeps a person in an addictive cycle. All because they are terrified of confronting that discomfort that leads to courage, which leads to vulnerability, which is the starting. Literally, it is where it is the nurturing nest of narcissism, codependency, borderline personality disorder, addiction. It's where it all starts, is right here. So in the cure, the real thing that comes right down to it, the catalyst, the be all end all is this right here. The grounding and the energizing. That is it. When you are looking at self-safety, what you are really looking to do is ground yourself and energize yourself. And the only way to do that is with love. In order to proceed, you must have a defined self. And the defined self is discovered in two places. It is in your, I like to call it a genie bottle. Some people call it a comfort zone, but I really don't like the word comfort because it's a misnomer and it's used so much that people don't process what it really is. So let's call it a genie bottle, but it's also in the adventure. So these are the two places where the self needs to be defined. Now, you are not going to figure out who you are sitting inside your genie bottle. Not going to happen. The only place to figure out who you are is on your learning journey of the defined self, which is your stages through the 12 ethics. The further you go into the 12 ethics, the more you're going to know who you are. The longer you're on that pilgrimage, the more you're going to know who you are. A lot of people sit in that first ethic, not living, waiting to figure themselves out, while also not doing the thing that is required for them to figure themselves out. The only way to define the self is to get on your life stream and live the journey. It is literally what I refer to as the learning journey of the defined self. And it takes place on your life stream. And this is it, be all, end all. There is nothing else. The learning journey of the defined self on your life stream. When something is good for you, it's because it's in your life stream. When something is bad for you, it's not in your life stream. If you are not going somewhere in life, it's because you are not on the learning journey of the defined self. And the 12 ethics are the learning journey of the defined self. It is your progression through the 12 ethical stages of the 12 ethical perspective stages of human growth and evolution. And that's it. This is your ethical IQ. This is 100% your ethical IQ. If you are familiar with the 12 ethics, well, then you've got the order of operations to go through your learning journey of the defined self. If you do not have the 12 ethics, then you are going to be taking shots in the dark, missing, because there's only 12 core ethics in the exact order of operations. And if you do not do them in the precise order, you are going to have mental illness. You are going to have problems. You are going to have a massive amount of consequences that lead to unhappiness, mental illness, instability, and yes, suicide. Absolutely. This is devastating. They are so powerful that when they were taken away from us in the 4th century, 100 years later, we went from a flourishing Roman Empire to the Dark Ages. That is how vital the 12 ethical stages of perspective growth are, that without them, we are in the Dark Ages. We are still in the Dark Ages. It's extraordinary. We have such an ingrained need to be good and ethical that we try, and we're all shooting in the dark trying to figure out these 12 ethics. Some of us have them figured out, and they are they're kind of on their live stream and they're living and they're happy. The people who've really figured it out are really, really happy, and they are all the way, and they are just living life grand because they have figured out the 12 ethics. The people who are unhappy are the people who are trying, they're toggling it, they're figuring it out, they're doing trial and error, but they don't know. And they are way off. Their logical code is so contaminated that they have no idea what is right and wrong, and what they think is right is wrong, and what they think is wrong is right, and they are really unhappy and messed up, and they are so confused. And then there are people, first ethics, who are so dedicated to being ethical that they would sooner not live, and they will sooner shut down than dare to live unethically. And then there are the unethical who have completely abandoned the ethical journey altogether and found perverse enjoyment in living outside of the ethics, and they do it on purpose. These are literally criminals, pedophiles, serial killers. These are really sick people. And that is way over there in that subject. So on that ethical journey, the majority of us are so ingrained with these that we feel them. They guide our lives. We are all driven to be good people. It astounds me. I have watched so much TV on this, so much. And once you see it, once you understand it, it's in every single story. I was watching Stranger Things last night, and it's season 4. They are on the Eddie manhunt, and the most abusive, unethical bully in the show. He is a teenager who drinks, he abuses and beats people, and he's literally looking to kill somebody. And he gives this very passionate speech in town hall about, we are good people. We want to be good people. There is good in this town. And he's given this massive ethical speech about good. The thing prior, he was breaking someone's fingers. He truly ethically believes that he is a good person. As I said, he's confused because he doesn't have the 12 ethics. He thinks, by the way, he's a third ethical perspective. He is 100% a third ethical perspective. He doesn't understand he is a third ethical perspective who's missing the first ethic. And that's he does not at all have courage to be vulnerable. So as a result, he doesn't understand courage. He doesn't understand vulnerability. He doesn't know how to connect. So he's fishing around in the dark for connection, having no idea how it's done. And he's going about it all the wrong way, but his intention is good. It's not ethical, but it's good. He's trying, but it's not ethical. And this is exactly what it looks like when you have somebody who's abusive, when you have somebody who's ignorant, when you have somebody who is really trying to be good. They think they're good people. They want to be good people. Wanting to be good people is not what makes you a good person. It is such a deep human need. It is our humanity. This is what we're talking about. This is our humanity. Let's jump over to Walking Dead. Dale, 2nd season. They're getting ready to kill this person, and he's done nothing wrong. He was just hanging out with the wrong crowd, and they don't know if he's going to tell everybody where he is. They don't know if he's going to go get his buddies and bring him back. So they decide, well, maybe we should kill him. And Dale steps forward and says, where is our humanity? And they're arguing back. First of all, Walking Dead is nothing but the ethics. It's all about the ethics. And they're all going, we don't have the luxury of ethics anymore. And Dale's saying, but it's the only thing we've got left of our humanity. And the show is the deterioration of the ethics as the societal system just collapses and ceases to exist. You see the ethics. Do you cling on to those ethics? This is Lord of the Flies. This is Heart of Darkness. This is Apocalypse Now. This is the movie Instinct. It is absolutely all revolving around these 12 ethics. And the intent to be good is not good enough. It is not good enough. Every Hitler believed he was acting ethically, and he was committing genocide, and he believed he was acting ethically. The 12 ethics are literally Mother Nature's guideline of showing you follow these 12 ethics and you connect, you respect all life, you remove the hierarchy, you abandon judgment, you abandon any kind of judgment. You stop seeking to use people and abuse people, and you start preserving them because you understand how much they affect you. It is absolutely a beautiful balance. It is balance. It is the preservation of Mother Nature's balance. These are the 12 ethics. That first one is courage. We're going to be covering self-authority next, which is my favorite. Oh my God, is it my favorite ethic? Self-authority is absolutely the be all end all, because even with courage, requires that self-authority to apply it to your own courage. So when you get into that second ethic, it is like self-authority amplified. And self-authority is the thing that follows you through all of life. As soon as you lose self-authority, you lose your power of choice, you lose your confidence, you lose your self-esteem, you lose your proof of concept, you lose excitement and motivation. As soon as you lose that second ethic, you lose everything. So next week, Wednesday, we're going to cover self-authority, and we're going to dive real deep into self-authority, what that looks like, and how it absolutely works with that first ethic of courage. So thank you so, so much, and may the kindest of words always find you.